My name is Natalia. I'm 28 years old, and right now I'm standing outside my childhood home in Michigan, shivering in the brutal cold while snow falls around me. Through the frosted window, I can see my family gathered around the Christmas dinner table, warm and comfortable, pretending I don't exist. The thermometer on the porch reads -6 degrees Celsius, and I've been out here for what feels like an eternity in just my thin sweater. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family. Trust me, what happens next will show you that sometimes the coldest moments lead to the warmest revelations. The path that led me to that freezing Christmas Eve actually started 3 months earlier in September. I had just lost my job at a major marketing firm in Chicago. Budget cuts, they said. Last in, first out. After burning through most of my savings trying to keep my apartment while job hunting, I had to make the phone call I'd been dreading. Moving back home to Michigan at 28 felt like admitting defeat, but I told myself it would only be temporary. My father, Robert, had served 20 years in the Army before retiring to work as a plant supervisor. At 55, he still ran our household like a military unit. Everything had a schedule, a proper way to be done, and there was zero tolerance for deviation. When I pulled up to the house with my car packed full of boxes, his first words weren't "welcome home" or "I'm sorry about your job." Instead, he looked at his watch and said, "You're 40 minutes later than you said you'd be." My mother, Linda, 52 years old, had hurried out behind him, offering me a quick hug before glancing nervously at Dad. She'd always been the buffer between us, but over the years that buffer had worn thin. She'd learned that staying quiet was easier than challenging him, and somewhere along the way, she'd stopped trying altogether. Then there was Kevin, my younger brother at 25. He'd followed Dad's approved path perfectly. State college for engineering, straight into a job at the same plant where Dad worked recently, engaged to a nice local girl Dad approved of. Kevin had learned early that life was easier when you didn't rock the boat. He got the praise, the pride, the approving nods at family gatherings. Amy, the baby at 22, was still in college studying nursing. She'd found her own way to survive in our house by becoming invisible. She stayed in her room, stayed out of arguments, and stayed neutral in every family conflict. Smart girl, really. From day one of my return, Dad made it clear that living under his roof meant living under his rules. Breakfast was at 7 sharp. If you missed it, you didn't eat until lunch. Everyone had assigned chores posted on a laminated schedule on the refrigerator. Bedtime was at 10:30, and he actually checked to make sure lights were off. At 28 years old, I had a curfew stricter than when I was in high school. I threw myself into job hunting, spending 8 to 10 hours a day sending out resumes, networking online, taking video interviews. The job market was brutal, especially heading into the holiday season. Every rejection email felt like another failure, and Dad made sure I felt it too. "Maybe if you'd studied something practical like your brother," he'd say over dinner. Marketing. What kind of real job is that? Making pretty pictures and writing slogans. Kevin would shift uncomfortably, but never defended me. Mom would suddenly become very interested in her mashed potatoes. Amy would excuse herself to study. The small conflicts started almost immediately. I'd come back from a job interview at 4 in the afternoon, and Dad would lecture me about wasting gas driving to Detroit. I'd buy myself a coffee while out, and he'd question why I was spending money when I didn't have a job. I'd stay up past 10:30 to prep for an interview, and he'd flip the circuit breaker to shut off the Wi-Fi. "This is about discipline," he'd say. "You lost your job because you lack discipline. Living like this, no wonder you're unemployed." Mom tried to mediate in her weak way. "Robert, she's trying her best," she'd whisper. But one sharp look from him would silence her. By November, the tension was unbearable. I'd started eating meals in my room to avoid the nightly critiques. Dad saw this as defiance. "We eat as a family," he declared. "If you want to eat alone, find your own place." The irony wasn't lost on me. I desperately wanted my own place, but without a job, I was trapped. Every day felt like walking on eggshells. And every night I'd lie in my childhood bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd ended up back here. The week before Christmas, the house transformed into what should have been a festive atmosphere. Mom pulled out the decorations that had been stored in the attic for 11 months, the same ornaments and garlands we'd had since I was 5. The artificial tree went up in its designated corner, and Dad supervised the decoration process like a drill sergeant, making sure each ornament was evenly spaced and properly secured. Our family had hosted Christmas Eve dinner for as long as I could remember. It was the one night Dad wanted everything perfect, not for the joy of the season, but to maintain his image as the successful patriarch. Relatives would come from across the state, bringing dishes and presents, and Dad would hold court telling stories about his military days and offering unsolicited life advice to younger cousins. While planning the menu with Mom, I suggested making the special cranberry orange tart that Grandma Dorothy had taught me years ago. It was a recipe that had been in her family for generations, something she'd learned from her own grandmother. The last time I'd made it was 5 years ago, the last Christmas Grandpa was alive. "We don't need any experimental dishes," Dad said without looking up from his newspaper. "Stick to the traditional menu. Linda has it all planned out." "It's not experimental," I protested. "It's Grandma's recipe. She serves it every year at her house." "This isn't her house. We do things properly here. Traditional turkey, traditional sides, traditional desserts. Pumpkin pie and apple pie, like always." Kevin, of course, was put in charge of the important tasks. Dad taught him the proper technique for carving the turkey, even though Kevin had been doing it for 3 years already. They spent an hour discussing the optimal temperature for roasting while I was assigned to dish duty and vegetable prep, the same jobs I'd had when I was 12. But I couldn't let it go. That tart meant something to me. It represented the warmth and love that seemed to be missing from this house. So I used my dwindling savings to buy the ingredients, hiding them in the back of the refrigerator behind the condiments. While Dad was at work and Mom was out shopping, I prepared the tart following Grandma's handwritten recipe card that I'd kept in my wallet all these years. On December 23rd, we had what should have been a celebratory dinner. I'd finally gotten good news, a second interview scheduled for December 27th with a digital marketing agency downtown. They'd been impressed with my portfolio and wanted to meet in person. It was the first real breakthrough in months. "I have amazing news," I announced as Mom served the pot roast. "Morrison Agency wants to meet with me. They're looking for a senior content strategist, and the recruiter said my experience is exactly what they're looking for." Mom's face lit up. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." Amy smiled genuinely. "That's awesome, Nat." Kevin nodded. "Good for you." Dad set down his fork deliberately. "Another interview. How many is this now, fifth, sixth?" "It's different this time. They've already reviewed my portfolio. This is the final round." "Right. And when this one doesn't pan out, how much longer do you plan on living here chasing these pipe dreams?" "It's not a pipe dream, it's a real opportunity." "Like the last real opportunity. And the one before that." He turned to Kevin. "Tell them about your promotion." Kevin looked uncomfortable. "Dad, this isn't the time." "Nonsense. Your sister could learn something. Kevin's been promoted to shift supervisor, youngest one in the plant's history. That's what happens when you choose a stable career path." "That's great, Kevin," I said, meaning it. I'd never resented my brother's success, just Dad's weaponization of it. "Great, it's exceptional. He'll be making 6 figures within 2 years. Benefits, pension, security. Not hoping someone likes his pretty pictures enough to maybe offer him a job." Something inside me snapped. "You know what, Dad, I'm proud of Kevin, but I'm also proud of myself. I built a successful career in Chicago. I was good at my job. The economy tanked, not me. Successful people don't end up unemployed living with their parents. Successful people support their children during tough times instead of belittling them." The table went silent. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Amy stared at her plate. Kevin cleared his throat. Dad's face turned red. "As long as you live under my roof, you'll show respect. Respect goes both ways." "You want to talk about respect? How about respecting the man who puts a roof over your head, feeds you, provides for you while you play on your computer all day, pretending to look for work?" "I'm not pretending anything. I've sent out over 200 applications. I've had 15 interviews. Do you know how exhausting it is to face rejection every single day while living with someone who reminds you constantly that you're a failure?" Mom finally spoke up. "Please, both of you. It's almost Christmas." Dad stood up his chair, scraping against the floor. "Christmas or not, I won't tolerate this disrespect. You think you're so independent, so capable. Then why are you here?" I stood up too, my hands shaking. Because I thought family meant something. Because I thought home was where you could go when things got tough. But this isn't home. It's a prison where you're the warden. If you don't like it, there's the door. Robert, Mom gasped. No, Linda. I'm done coddling her. She wants to act like an ungrateful child she can find somewhere else to stay. I looked around the table. Mom had tears in her eyes, but wouldn't meet my gaze. Kevin was studying his hands. Amy looked like she wanted to disappear. Fine, I said quietly. After Christmas. I'll leave after Christmas. You'll adjust your attitude or you'll leave before Christmas. I walked out of the dining room, my appetite completely gone. Behind me, I heard Mom's quiet pleading and Dad's sharp responses, but I couldn't make out the words. In my room, I sat on my bed and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snowfall and dropping temperatures. The house buzzed with activity as Mom prepared for the evening's dinner party. The smell of turkey roasting filled the air, mixing with cinnamon and pine. I spent the morning helping Mom in the kitchen, both of us carefully avoiding any mention of the previous night's argument. By 3 in the afternoon, relatives started arriving. Uncle Pete and Aunt Susan from Grand Rapids, bringing their famous green bean casserole. Cousin Jennifer with her new boyfriend, carrying a box of homemade cookies. Dad's brother Tom and his family, loud and cheerful, filling the house with laughter that felt forced in the underlying tension. I stayed busy in the kitchen, putting finishing touches on my hidden cranberry orange tart. I decided to bring it out anyway, a small act of defiance that felt important somehow. It was cooling in the pantry, decorated with sugared cranberries and orange zest, looking exactly like the photo Grandma had shown me years ago. Around 5 o'clock, while I was arranging appetizers, Dad walked into the kitchen. His face changed when he saw the tart on the counter where I'd just moved it. What is that, the tart I mentioned? Grandma Dorothy's recipe. I told you not to make it. I made it with my own money on my own time. It's just a dessert, Dad. It's disobedience is what it is. His voice was rising, and Uncle Pete peered in from the living room. Everything okay in here? Pete asked. Fine, Dad said tersely. Natalia was just putting that away, weren't you? No, I wasn't. It's Christmas Eve. I made Grandma's special dessert. Why is this such a big deal to you? The big deal is that you can't follow simple instructions. You can't respect boundaries. You do whatever you want whenever you want, and then wonder why your life is a mess. My life is a mess, at least I'm not a tyrant who controls everyone around him. The kitchen went silent. Mom stood frozen by the stove. Aunt Susan appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. A tyrant? Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. I've provided for this family for 30 years. I've maintained order, discipline, structure. Without me, this family would fall apart. Without you, this family might actually be happy. The words hung in the air like icicles, sharp and cold. Dad's face went from red to purple. You want to talk about happiness? You were happy enough to come crawling back here when your fancy city life fell apart. Happy enough to eat my food, use my electricity, live under my roof. I never wanted to come back here. You think I enjoyed admitting defeat? But I thought stupidly that family meant something. That you'd changed. But you're exactly the same as when I was a kid. Remember when I was 10 and you made me stand in the corner for 3 hours because I got a B on a spelling test? Or when I was 15 and you grounded me for a month because I was 5 minutes past curfew? You've always been a dictator, Dad. Kevin just learned to be your perfect soldier, and Mom learned to be invisible. Well, I'm neither. How dare you speak to me like that in my own home in front of my family? Your home, your family. What about Mom's home, our family? Or don't we count unless we're following your orders? Jennifer and her boyfriend quietly retreated to the living room. Tom tried to intervene. Robert, come on, it's Christmas. Stay out of this, Tom. Dad turned back to me. You think you know everything? You think your failure is my fault? You've always been ungrateful, always rebellious, always thinking you're too good for this family. I never thought I was too good for this family. I just thought I deserved to be treated like a human being instead of a recruit in your personal army. Get out. The words were quiet but final. What? Mom finally spoke. I said get out. If she hates it here so much, she can leave. right now. Robert, it's Christmas Eve. It's freezing outside. She should have thought of that before disrespecting me in front of everyone. Dad, Amy appeared in the doorway, voice shaking. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. She wants independence. She can have it. Get out of my house. I looked at Mom, pleading with my eyes. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. Kevin stood behind Amy, silent as always. Fine, I said, my voice breaking. I'll get my coat. No, you leave now, as you are. Robert, Aunt Susan gasped. She needs a coat. It's below freezing. She needs to learn respect. A little cold air might clear her head. I couldn't believe what was happening, but looking at his face, I knew he meant it. I walked toward the door, hoping someone would stop this insanity. No one moved. Dad followed me to the door and held it open. Arctic air rushed in, making everyone shiver. Dad, please. I tried one more time. Out! I stepped onto the porch, and before I could turn around, the door slammed shut. I heard the deadbolt turn. I knocked immediately. Dad, this is crazy. Let me in. No response. I went to the window and could see everyone in the living room. Mom was crying quietly. Amy was arguing with Dad, but he wasn't listening. Kevin stood by the fireplace looking uncomfortable. The relatives were whispering among themselves. The cold hit me like a physical assault. I was wearing only jeans and a thin cashmere sweater I'd bought in better times. No coat, no gloves, no hat. The wind cut through the fabric like it wasn't there. I knocked again, harder. Please, it's freezing, Mom. Someone. Through the window, I saw Dad say something sharp to the others. Everyone turned away from the windows. They were actually going to leave me out here. The first 5 minutes weren't too bad. Adrenaline and anger kept me warm, and I was certain someone would break and let me in. This was insane, even for Dad. Surely Mom would stand up to him. Surely Kevin would remember I was his sister. Surely one of the relatives would insist this had gone too far. But 10 minutes passed, then 15. The adrenaline wore off and the cold became a living thing wrapping around me like chains. My fingers went numb first, then my toes. I tried to keep moving, pacing the porch, but the wind kept picking up, driving snow into my face like tiny needles. Through the dining room window, I watched them sit down to dinner. Dad carved the turkey with Kevin just as they'd practiced. Mom served the side dishes with shaking hands, but a forced smile. Amy kept glancing toward the window until Dad said something that made her look away. The relatives were clearly uncomfortable, but no one challenged him. I knocked again, my frozen knuckles barely making a sound. Please, I'm sorry, just let me in. Nothing. 20 minutes in, I started shivering uncontrollably. My body was jackknifing with the force of it, muscles seizing and releasing in desperate attempts to generate heat. I huddled against the door, trying to find any spot where the wind couldn't reach me, but there was no escape. The porch was open on 3 sides, and the snow was now falling heavily, coating my hair and shoulders. I thought about walking to a neighbor's house, but the nearest one was half a mile away, and I could barely feel my feet. My phone was inside, my car keys were inside, my everything was inside. I was trapped. 25 minutes. My thoughts were getting fuzzy. I knew this was dangerous, knew hypothermia was a real possibility, but I couldn't seem to focus on solutions. All I could think about was how warm it looked inside, how the Christmas lights twinkled mockingly, how everyone was eating and laughing while I was out here freezing. I saw Mom stand up from the table and walk toward the door. My heart leaped, but Dad followed her, and through the glass I could see him grabbing her arm, leading her back to the table. She was crying openly now, but she sat back down. 30 minutes. I couldn't stop shaking. My teeth were chattering so hard I thought they might break. I'd lost feeling in my hands and feet entirely. The world was starting to go white around the edges, whether from the snow or something worse, I couldn't tell. That's when I saw the headlights. A car pulled into the driveway, moving slowly through the accumulating snow. It was a burgundy Buick, older but well-maintained, and I knew that car. I'd ridden in it countless times as a child, going for ice cream or secret shopping trips. Grandma Dorothy. She parked and got out, bundled in her thick winter coat, moving remarkably quickly for a 78-year-old woman. When she saw me huddled on the porch, her face transformed from confusion to horror to fury in the span of seconds. Natalia, oh my God, child! She rushed up the steps, pulling off her coat as she moved. What are you doing out here? Where's your coat? Grandma, I managed through chattering teeth. Dad locked me out. He what? Her voice was deadly quiet. She wrapped her coat around me, then half carried me to her car. The heat inside hit me like a wall, painful and wonderful at once. She turned the heater on full blast, adjusted all the vents to point at me, then grabbed a blanket from the back seat. How long have you been out there? 30 minutes, maybe more. In this weather, without a coat. She was rubbing my hands between hers, trying to bring back circulation. That son of mine has lost his mind. She held me while I shook, not saying anything else for several minutes. Gradually, the violent shivering subsided to trembles, and feeling returned to my fingers and toes in painful prickles. This ends tonight, she said quietly, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Steel, determination, fury. He was always hard on us, she continued, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined, and the others just let it happen. I nodded, unable to speak through the tears that were finally coming. Just like his father, she murmured. I thought I'd broken that cycle, but here we are again. She pulled back to look at me, her weathered hands cupping my face. Listen to me, Natalia. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. What happened tonight is abuse, plain and simple, and it stops now. He won't listen to you, I managed to say. Oh, he'll listen, she said grimly. He'll listen, or he'll lose more than just his temper. She waited until I stopped shaking completely, then helped me out of the car. Can you walk? I think so. Good, because we're going in there together and we're going to end this once and for all. She kept her arm around me as we walked to the door. It was locked, but Grandma had a key. She'd had one for 20 years for emergencies. This qualifies, she muttered, turning the lock. We walked in to find everyone still at the dinner table, though the meal had clearly stalled. Conversation stopped mid-word. Every face turned to us, expressions ranging from relief to fear to anger. Dad stood up immediately. Mother, this doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me? Grandma's voice could have frozen fire. You locked my granddaughter outside in sub-zero weather without a coat. You could have killed her. So yes, Robert, this very much concerns me. The dining room erupted in chaos. Dad tried to speak, but Grandma raised her hand sharply, and something in her gesture made him stop. I'd never seen anyone silence my father so effectively. Sit down, Robert. Mother, you don't understand what happened here. I said sit down. Her voice cracked like a whip. Uncle Tom's kids started crying. Aunt Susan ushered them into the living room. Dad, shocked, actually sat. Grandma helped me into a chair, making sure I was wrapped in her coat, then stood at the head of the table. At barely 5 feet 2 inches, she somehow dominated the room. I drove 3 hours through a snowstorm because something told me I needed to be here tonight. Call it intuition, call it God, call it whatever you want. And I find my granddaughter freezing on the porch like a stray dog while all of you sit in here eating dinner. She was disrespectful, Dad started. Disrespectful. Grandma laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about disrespect? How about the disrespect you're showing to everything I tried to teach you? Everything I sacrificed to make sure you didn't turn out like your father. The room went silent. Dad never talked about Grandpa Joe, who died when I was 3. I had vague memories of a stern man who smelled like cigarettes and bourbon. You remember Christmas Eve, 1979, Robert. Grandma continued. You were 25. You'd just gotten engaged to Linda. You came home for Christmas and you and your father got into it about your career choices. Remember what he did? Dad's face had gone pale. He locked you out, middle of winter. You walked 2 miles to the gas station to call me. I drove over here and found you half frozen just like I found Natalia tonight. Mom gasped softly. She clearly hadn't known this story. I swore that night that the cycle would end. Your father had learned it from his father who learned it from his father. Generation after generation of men who confused fear with respect, control with love. I thought I'd protected you from it. I thought when your father died, that poison died with him. But here you are, 45 years later, doing the exact same thing to your own daughter. It's not the same, Dad protested weakly. It's exactly the same. The need to control everything, the inability to tolerate any disagreement, the cruel punishments disguised as discipline. You hated your father for it, Robert. You told me you'd never be like him. So what happened? Dad couldn't answer. His hands were shaking. Grandma turned to Mom. And you, Linda. You sat here and let this happen. Where was your backbone? Where was your protection of your child? Mom started crying harder. I tried, Dorothy. I wanted to help, but Robert, nothing. You're her mother. Your job is to protect her, even if it means standing up to your husband. Especially then. She looked at Kevin and Amy. And you two. I know it's hard to stand up to your father, but this is your sister. Your blood, and you let her freeze out there. Amy was sobbing now. I'm sorry, Nat. I'm so sorry. I wanted to help, but I was scared. Kevin couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Dad said she needed to learn a lesson. A lesson? Grandma's voice rose again. The only lesson being taught here is that this family values obedience over love, control over compassion. Is that really what you want to learn, Kevin? Is that the man you want to become? She surveyed the room, making eye contact with each relative. And all of you. You witnessed this and did nothing. Every single one of you is complicit in what happened tonight. Uncle Tom cleared his throat. Dorothy, we didn't feel it was our place. Your place? A young woman was being abused, and you didn't think it was your place to intervene. What if she died out there, Tom? Would it have been your place then? The silence was deafening. Grandma pulled out a chair and sat down suddenly, looking every one of her 78 years. I'm going to tell you all something I've never told anyone except my therapist. Joe, my husband, your father, Robert, was abusive. Not just strict, not just tough, abusive. He hit me. He hit you boys when you were young. He controlled every aspect of our lives with fear and intimidation. Dad's face crumpled. This was clearly painful territory. I stayed for 20 years because I thought that's what wives did. Because I thought the boys needed a father. Because I was scared. But mostly because I'd been taught that this was normal. My father had treated my mother the same way. It was all I knew. She looked directly at Dad. When you were 15, Robert, your father, backhanded you so hard you lost a tooth. Do you remember? Dad nodded silently. That was the day I finally fought back. I told him if he ever touched any of you again, I'd leave and take you with me. It took every ounce of courage I had, but I did it. And he never hit you again. But the damage was done, wasn't it? The patterns were set. The anger was learned. She reached across the table and took Dad's hand. I failed you, son. I should have left earlier. I should have protected you better. I should have gotten us all therapy. Instead, I just tried to manage him, to work around him, to keep the peace. And in doing so, I taught you that power and control were the only ways to feel safe. Dad was crying now, silent tears rolling down his face. I'd never seen my father cry before. But it stops tonight, Grandma said firmly. This generational curse ends here. Natalia, you deserve better. Robert, you can be better. This family can heal, but only if we acknowledge what's broken. She turned to me. Granddaughter, I'm offering you a choice. You can come stay with me in Detroit for as long as you need. My house is your house. Or if your father can genuinely apologize and commit to change, you can try to work this out. But I won't let you stay here if nothing changes. I won't watch another generation suffer. Dad stood up slowly, walking around the table to where I sat. He knelt down beside my chair, something I'd never seen him do before. Natalia, he said, his voice broken. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I could have killed you tonight. I let my pride, my need for control, almost destroy my daughter. There's no excuse for what I did. None. I looked at him, this man who terrorized my childhood, controlled my adolescence, and nearly frozen me to death on Christmas Eve. But I also saw the scared 15-year-old boy who'd lost a tooth to his father's rage. I can't just forgive and forget, I said quietly. Not this time. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking for a chance to earn your forgiveness, to get help, to change. You've had 28 years to change, Dad. I know, but I never saw it before. I never saw that I'd become him, the man I hated most in the world, and I became him. Grandma spoke up. There's a family therapist I know in Detroit, Dr. Patterson. She specializes in generational trauma. Robert, if you're serious about changing, you'll see her. All of you should. Dad nodded. I'll go. I'll do whatever it takes. And Natalia still comes with me tonight, Grandma said firmly. She needs space to heal, and you need time to reflect on what you've done. I stood up, still wrapped in Grandma's coat, and faced my family. The relatives had filtered back in from the living room, everyone watching to see what would happen next. I'm going with Grandma, I announced. I need to be somewhere safe, and this house isn't safe for me. Mom stood up. Natalia, please. We can work this out. No, Mom, we can't. Not like this. You let him lock me out. You all did. You sat there eating Christmas dinner while I could have died on the porch. That's not something we can just work out over coffee. But it's Christmas, Amy said through her tears. It was Christmas when Dad locked me out, too. I walked to my room, Dad and Mom following. I packed quickly, throwing clothes and essentials into my suitcase. My hands were still trembling, whether from cold or emotion I couldn't tell. The job interview, Mom remembered. On the 27th. I'll drive back for it, I said. Or maybe I'll request a video call. Either way, I'll figure it out. I've been figuring things out on my own for a while now. Dad stood in the doorway looking lost. What can I do? How can I make this right? You can get help. Real help. Not just a few sessions to appease Grandma, but actual long-term therapy. You can look at why you need to control everyone around you, why you can't tolerate any disagreement, why you treat your family like soldiers instead of people you love. I do love you, he said desperately. I know you do in your way. But your way of loving is toxic, Dad. It's harmful. And I won't subject myself to it anymore. I zipped up my suitcase and turned to Mom. You need help too. You need to figure out why you've accepted this for so long, why you've enabled it, why you chose him over your children's well-being. That's not fair, she protested. Isn't it? How many times did he punish us unfairly while you stood by? How many times did we come to you for protection only to be told not to upset your father? You're not innocent in this, Mom. Your silence made you complicit. Kevin appeared in the hallway. Nat, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have done something. You should have, but I understand why you didn't. You learned early that conformity meant survival in this house. Keep your head down, follow the rules, don't make waves. It kept you safe, but at what cost? Everything, he admitted. I don't even know who I am outside of who Dad wants me to be. Then maybe it's time to find out. Amy hugged me tightly. Please don't hate us. I don't hate you, any of you. But I can't keep pretending this is normal. I can't keep accepting crumbs of affection between periods of control and criticism. I deserve better. We walked back to the dining room where Grandma was waiting. The relatives were gathering their things, the party clearly over. The cranberry orange tart I'd made sat untouched on the counter, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Grandma picked it up. We're taking this with us. It looks beautiful, sweetheart. As we headed to the door, Dad made one more attempt. When will we see you again? When you've done the work. When you can treat me as an equal, not a subordinate. When this house becomes a home instead of a boot camp. The family will talk, Uncle Tom said quietly. People will ask questions. Good, I said. Maybe it's time this family started talking about the things we've been hiding. Maybe honesty would do us all some good. Grandma and I walked out into the snow, but this time I was prepared. Coat, gloves, scarf, and most importantly, I was choosing to leave rather than being forced out. That made all the difference. As we drove away, I looked back at the house. They were all standing at the window watching us go. The Christmas lights twinkled mockingly, a facade of warmth and joy that masked the coldness within. You did the right thing, Grandma said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Then why does it hurt so much? Because you're grieving. Not just for tonight, but for the family you wished you had. The father you deserved. The mother who should have protected you. It's okay to grieve that even while you're choosing something better. We drove through the quiet streets, snow falling softly on the windshield. Other houses glowed with Christmas warmth, families inside, presumably celebrating together. I wondered how many of them were also hiding dysfunction behind their holiday decorations. Tell me about the interview, Grandma said, changing the subject to something lighter. I told her about Morrison Agency, about the position, about my portfolio. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions, showing the kind of support I'd been craving from my parents. You know, she said as we got on the highway to Detroit, I always knew you were different from the others, stronger. You have a fire in you that couldn't be extinguished no matter how hard your father tried. That's why he was so hard on you. You threatened his control just by existing. I just wanted him to be proud of me. He is in his broken way, but he's also terrified of you. You represent everything he was never allowed to be. Independent, creative, free. Every time you succeeded on your own terms, it reminded him of all the ways he'd compromised himself to fit his father's mold. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. The heater warmed my body, but more importantly, Grandma's presence warmed my soul. Here was the unconditional love I'd been seeking. Thank you for coming tonight, I said. How did you know? She smiled mysteriously. Mother's intuition extends to grandmother's too. I woke up this morning with the strongest feeling that you needed me. Packed my car and started driving before I even knew why. Divine intervention. Maybe. Or maybe the universe just decided enough was enough. As we pulled into her driveway in Detroit, snow crunching under the tires, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just for the job interview, but for my life, for the possibility of healing, for the chance to break free from patterns that had held my family hostage for generations. Welcome home, Grandma said, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt like I was. The morning after Christmas, I woke up in Grandma's guest room to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, creating patterns on the hardwood floor. For a moment, I forgot where I was, why I was there. Then it all came rushing back. I checked my phone, 17 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, dozens of texts from Amy and Kevin. I wasn't ready to deal with any of it yet, so I put the phone aside and went downstairs. Grandma was in the kitchen humming while she cooked. She'd always been an early riser up with the sun regardless of the season. The kitchen was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, warm yellow walls covered with photographs spanning decades. Morning, sweetheart. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, actually. Good. Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready. She served me eggs, bacon toast, and fresh fruit, along with orange juice and coffee. Real breakfast, not the military-style efficient meal Dad insisted on. We could eat at our own pace, talk or not talk, just exist in comfortable companionship. I've been thinking, she said after a while. You should stay here as long as you need. The commute to your interview isn't bad, and if you get the job, we can figure out a long-term plan. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. This house has been too quiet since your grandfather passed. I'd love the company. Even Grandpa Joe. She smiled sadly. Even him sometimes. He wasn't always angry, you know. When I first met him, he was charming, funny, full of dreams. The war changed him. His father's abuse shaped him. By the time he recognized the patterns, he was too proud to change. Sound familiar? Do you think Dad can actually change? I don't know, but at least he's admitting there's a problem. That's more than his father ever did. Over the next few days, we settled into a routine. Grandma gave me space when I needed it, but was always available to talk. She helped me prepare for my interview, letting me practice my presentation, while she played the role of skeptical client. She was surprisingly good at it. I ran my own business for 15 years after your grandfather died, she reminded me. I know a thing or two about selling yourself. The day of the interview, she drove me to the train station and waited to pick me up afterward. The interview went better than I could have hoped. Morrison Agency was everything my previous job wasn't: creative, collaborative, innovative. They offered me the position on the spot with a start date of January 15th. We need someone with your exact experience, the creative director said. Your portfolio shows real strategic thinking, not just pretty designs. When can you start? I called Grandma from the lobby, crying happy tears. I got it. I got the job. Of course you did. Never doubted it for a second. Let's celebrate. That evening, as we shared a bottle of wine and the cranberry orange tart I'd made for Christmas, my phone rang. It was Dad. I looked at Grandma, who nodded encouragingly. You'll have to talk to him eventually. Hello, Natalia. His voice was different, quieter, uncertain. I wanted to let you know I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Patterson, January 3rd. I also wanted to ask if you'd consider doing a session with me when you're ready. I'll think about it. That's fair. Also, your mother and I have been talking, really talking. She's going to start seeing someone too. We realize we have a lot of work to do. What about Kevin and Amy? Kevin's been here all day yesterday and today. We've had some difficult conversations about his childhood, about the pressure I put on him. Amy's coming home from college early. She wants to talk to you when you're ready. I'm glad you're getting help, Dad. But this doesn't fix everything overnight. I know. I don't expect it to. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. After I hung up, Grandma asked, how do you feel? Confused, hopeful, angry, sad, everything at once. That sounds about right. 2 months passed. I started my new job and thrived. The team at Morrison valued creativity and innovation. My ideas were heard, implemented, celebrated. I found a small apartment near the office, but still visited Grandma every weekend. Dad kept his therapy appointments. Mom started seeing her own therapist and joined a support group for women in controlling relationships. Kevin took a vacation, the first one he'd ever taken without Dad's approval, and went backpacking in Colorado. Amy changed her major from nursing to psychology, inspired by recent events to understand family dynamics. The family group chat, which had been silent since Christmas, slowly came back to life. Not with superficial pleasantries, but with real sharing. Kevin posted about his hiking adventures. Amy shared articles about generational trauma. Mom sent quotes from books she was reading about codependency. Dad's messages were sparse but significant. A photo of Dr. Patterson's office, a simple "I'm sorry" on Random Tuesday, a link to an article about military veterans and control issues with the message, "This helped me understand some things." I didn't respond to most of them, but I read everything. In March, Dr. Patterson reached out. Your father has made significant progress. He'd like to do a family session if you're willing. No pressure, but I think it could be helpful for everyone. I agreed with conditions. Grandma would come with me. We'd meet at Dr. Patterson's office, not at the house. And if I wanted to leave at any point, no one would stop me. The session was painful. Dad talked about his father's abuse in detail I'd never heard before. Cigarette burns, locked in closets, beaten with belts. Mom cried as she recognized how she'd perpetuated patterns from her own controlling father. Kevin admitted he'd been suicidal in college but never told anyone because he couldn't be imperfect. Amy revealed she'd developed an eating disorder, trying to be invisible enough to avoid Dad's scrutiny. This family has been sick for generations, Dr. Patterson said. But you're all here doing the work. That's remarkable. It wasn't a magic fix. There were setbacks. Dad slipped into old patterns during a stressful time at work, and I went no contact for 3 weeks. Mom still sometimes defaulted to peacekeeping instead of truth-telling. But slowly, painfully, things improved. By the next Christmas, everything had changed. We gathered at Grandma's house instead of my parents'. The meal was potluck style, everyone contributing equally. There were no assigned seats, no rigid schedule, no one person in charge. Dad arrived with a homemade dish, something he'd never done before. I took a cooking class, he said almost shyly. Thought I should learn to do more than just give orders in the kitchen. Mom came separately, having driven herself. She'd bought her own car, made her own friends, started living as an individual rather than just Robert's wife. Kevin brought his new girlfriend, someone Dad hadn't pre-approved. She was an artist covered in tattoos, everything Dad would have once forbidden. But he shook her hand warmly and asked genuine questions about her work. Amy brought her psychology textbooks, excitedly sharing what she was learning about breaking toxic cycles. She'd become the family's unofficial therapist, though Dr. Patterson warned against taking on that role too heavily. After dinner, as we all sat around Grandma's living room, Dad cleared his throat. I wanted to say something. Last Christmas was the worst night of my life, not because of what was said, but because of what I did. I could have lost you, Natalia. I nearly did lose you in more ways than one. He paused, struggling with the words. But in a way, I'm grateful it happened. It forced me to see what I'd become. It broke the denial I'd lived in for decades. It saved our family, even though it nearly destroyed it first. The night I locked you out, I became my father completely. But that was also the night I finally understood I had a choice. I could continue the cycle or break it. Thanks to your grandmother and to you standing up to me, I got the chance to choose differently. He looked directly at me. I love you, Natalia. I've always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it without control. I'm still learning. I'll probably mess up again. But I promise you, I will never, ever treat you or anyone in this family that way again. I believe you want to change, Dad. And I've seen you trying. But trust takes time to rebuild. I know. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I'm just grateful you're here. That we all are. Grandma raised her glass of wine. To breaking cycles, to healing, to the family we're becoming, not the family we were. We all toasted even Dad with his juice since he'd stopped drinking as part of his therapy. Later that evening, as I helped Grandma clean up, she pulled me aside. I'm proud of you. What you did took incredible courage. I was just trying to survive. No, you were doing more than that. You were refusing to accept the unacceptable. You were demanding better, not just for yourself, but for everyone. That's how change happens. One brave person says no more. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I thought about the journey from last Christmas to this one. The frozen porch felt like a lifetime ago, though the memory still made me shiver. But I'd survived it. We'd all survived it. The family we were becoming wasn't perfect. We still had therapy appointments, difficult conversations, moments of regression. But we were trying. We were honest. We were choosing love over control, connection over dominance. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Thank you for giving us another chance. Drive safe. I smiled, remembering the man who would have demanded to know my exact route departure time and expected arrival. This simple expression of care without control was worth more than all the apologies in the world. That Christmas taught me that love isn't about control and family isn't about obedience. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away even in the cold, knowing that somewhere warmer awaits. And sometimes, if you're lucky, that act of leaving creates the space for everyone to choose differently. The cycle was broken. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough for hope. Enough for healing. Enough for the kind of family we all deserved from the beginning. Did anyone else grow up in a household where love felt conditional on obedience? Where standing up for yourself meant risking everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. How did you break free from toxic family patterns? What gave you the courage to demand better? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family trauma and finding your own path. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in dealing with difficult family dynamics. Remember, you deserve love that doesn't come with conditions, respect that doesn't require submission, and a family that celebrates who you are, not who they demand you to be. Thank you for listening to my story. May your holidays be filled with the warmth of genuine love and acceptance, and may you always have the courage to choose your own well-being, even when it means walking away from those who should protect you most. Until next time, remember, you are worthy of unconditional love just as you are.